We have been bitten by a bug or possessed by a demon because we cannot stop thinking and talking about playing by ear on the piano. And this all started with the visualizer that I created, and now I just can't stop thinking about it. Even though the previous video was literally me saying, oh yeah, we figured everything out in terms of like how we want to see it, the framework. Now let's just practice. But I feel like there's things missing. I just feel like there's something missing, and I kept thinking about it overnight, like right before sleeping or right before making that video, actually. And then I just did not, yeah, I just kept thinking about it constantly for the next like 3 hours. And then once I slept and I woke up, I once again thought about it, and I couldn't stop. So I just want to like get every point out. Honestly, at this point, it's like I want to call this series like Musings of a Madman Who Wants to Play Piano by Ear, because that's what I feel like. I just feel like someone who's gone crazy, who, like, honestly, you shouldn't even listen to me. And this is more so to express myself and for fun, rather than actually trying to make a legit guide. Because I'll make a legit guide once I actually have the skill. But for now, this is just me. It's literally just my musings. It's literally just me expressing what I think, and that's it. There's nothing to this other than that. Whether or not I succeed determines, like I said, whether I'm a madman or. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these things will change also. I'm pretty sure, like, a year from now, I'll look at these videos and I'll think how silly I was. But right now, I feel so impassioned by this that I have no choice but to express this. It's kind of how I see it. Anyways, so I'll just read out some of my notes and also talk about how I'm going to practice, because all of this thinking is actually going to affect my practice, and I'm going to change how I practice. I know this camera is not as good as the previous one, but there's some noise upstairs, and I just want to get this done. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So firstly, when I was thinking a lot about this stuff, I was like trying to think about perfect pitch as well, because perfect pitch is interesting. I feel like perfect pitch is not like language. Perfect pitch is like an ability that's outside of language. And for yesterday's video, I made the comparison of language and learning relative pitch, because I actually do think relative, like gaining the skill of relative pitch is very much like learning a language compared to perfect pitch, where it's kind of just this interesting ability for you to pick out frequencies. You actually still need to learn a level of relative pitch even if you have perfect pitch. You have to learn the framework of how like most music out there works. So I thought about that, and I thought it's quite interesting how that works. And I was thinking to myself, one of my questions is because, like, out there, I've watched a lot of videos about perfect pitch, and there's this one guy, I think his name is like Biero or something. He claims that perfect pitch is unachievable when you're an adult. And I've always kind of like thought that's silly. Let me see if I can sign into ChatGPT real quick, because I want to ask ChatGPT like what the what they think about perfect pitch being learned as an adult. Because I've also heard from like a friend or two that they knew someone who's an adult that learned perfect pitch, but it was just like really, really hard to learn. But yeah, I guess let me just talk while I try to sign in. I don't know why it signed me out, but I don't know if I fully believe them because I never met the person. I would like to actually try to meet someone who gained perfect pitch or claims to have gained perfect pitch as an adult, because it seems like a very, very hard thing to do. And again, I just don't know if it's possible, especially since like we have people who are like good at ear training who claim that it's impossible at an older age. You know what? Forget this. It's not working. I'm just gonna type it in Google. Is perfect pitch achievable as an adult? Oops. Okay, yes, recent research suggests that some adults can learn perfect pitch, also known as absolute pitch, with focused training. While it was previously thought to be an innate ability limited to those with early musical exposure, studies have shown that adults can develop the ability to identify musical notes by ear through targeted exercises. Okay. Apparently, that's what Gemini's saying. So, acquiring perfect pitch may be possible for some adults. I'm going to look into this a bit more because we actually do want to include some perfect pitch training into our routine. I don't know how useful it's going to be or how effective it's going to be, but I'll look into it a bit more. But for now, let's guess what C is. I'm somewhat close. So for me, I've done so much ear training that, and every ear training app for some reason uses C as a tonic note, that I think I may have internalized how C sounds like. That's how I'm able to guess some of the tonics, different tonics, is because I have an intuitive sense of what C sounds like. So whether or not it's like near C or below C or above C, usually I have like maybe a 75% hit rate in terms of like getting it accurate. Unless I just like played a different song or played a different piece where my tonic has slightly shifted, but my natural tonic seems to be C, basically just because of a lot of ear training. So I guess in a way it's like pitch memory. We're talking about pitch memory, and perfect pitch is just like really, really solid pitch memory of every pitch in a way. So what I've achieved is really good pitch memory of C. And that just happened over lots of years of ear training in general. And when I talk about ear training, my playing by ear journey started last year. But when it comes to ear training, like you kind of do have to do a little bit of that, especially since for me, I took the ABRSM exams. I passed all of them. And in those exams, you do have to do, like, you have to listen to cadences, like identify them. You have to listen to, actually there was a test where they asked you what key signature it was, and they gave you like multiple choice. And I was like, how in the world do you do that? So I always guessed, but now that I'm better, I feel like it would be knowing C and then determining whether or not the tonic of that is above or below C, or just use C as a reference and then figure out from there. Because actually, last night I was listening to random frequencies like of my toothbrush, and my toothbrush is apparently, my electric toothbrush is apparently the pitch C, which is like hilarious to me. But it means like I have a reference every time I wake up and brush my teeth or go to sleep. And then the ventilation system of my shower, it's like B flat. Of course, there's multiple tones, but the dominant tone that I hear is B flat. And then there's this fan that goes on sometimes in the house, and when I'm hearing it, I hear an A. So I'm starting to, and also these things I picked up because I have a reference note for C, and then I checked afterwards. So I was like kind of amazed at how accurate I could be by just having a reference note. I mean, that's the whole point of relative pitch, but I'm wondering if I can somehow turn it into some form of perfect pitch in the future. But that's just something I noted that I found very, very interesting and has made me think about exploring perfect pitch more. And especially just Googling it right now, them saying that some adults can still achieve it, I'm kind of curious now. And I might as well talk about this exercise that I actually came up with on my own for perfect pitch. So one of the reasons why perfect pitch is so hard to achieve is because oftentimes our brain, we're very used to relative pitch now. So we sort of hear that as a tonic. As soon as we shift keys, that was not a good modulation. I'm forgetting what the 4 of this key is. Hold on. So everything sort of sounds like it shifted over, and I can recognize the tonic quite easily. But that messes me up in terms of what C is. Now I'm going to try to sing C again. It's really hard, actually. I'm trying not to use relative pitch because C is actually in the key of E flat, so I could use relative pitch to figure out what C is, but I'm gonna just go off of memory. Nga. Okay, I actually got it. Let's try to do one where C is not in the key, so it makes it slightly harder. Let's try F sharp. I think maybe, all right, let's try it. Ma. I already got it wrong. See? Ma. I guessed C sharp instead of C because the key that I'm listening to and playing screwed with my memory of that pitch. So because that happens, I reasoned to myself that if you were to switch keys but focus really, really hard on just the pitch itself while switching keys, then you might be able to get a better grasp of that frequency regardless of what key it's in. So that's kind of hard to understand without an example. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're playing in the key of C. We just have to really, really pay attention to this pitch, right? Now we're in the key of B flat, but C is the second degree, but we're still playing it, so we know the frequency, how it sounds like, even though it functions differently. We can move keys again. And we're sort of hearing this frequency in a whole lot of contexts that are different from the usual tonic context of C major. So we get to understand this frequency across the board in different, like I just said, different contexts. So that made me think about like the fundamentals, like what is it to actually recognize things in general, like what's pattern recognition in general. And for pattern recognition, it's like it really, all of it can be summed up to be, or broken down to be, differences and being the same. That's basically it. Like, so there's something very special in just like differences. So pattern recognition can only happen with some differences. If everything's the same, then there's no pattern to recognize. So highlight differences, like high and low, like long. I actually like thinking a lot about the like frequencies and wavelengths and what they physically actually are, because you know we use numbers to assign them, but that's just like our mental construction of them. What actually is a frequency? It's like a vibration in the air, where when we're talking about sound, it's a vibration in the air where like there's just, it vibrates differently according to the wavelength and frequency, and we call that pitch. So you can actually hear, you can physically feel, like when you sing, like something lower versus something higher, like you can physically feel the difference of the frequency and the vibrations. So it's not like a, you know, wonky thing that I'm trying to make up in my head about how it's different physically, but it actually is something you can feel. Like you can actually feel different frequencies and wavelengths when you sing, especially. And our brains can feel it too. We call it pitch. So there's a way to actually connect what it actually really is in physical reality to our brains. So like the feeling of each note, when we call it relative pitch, the feeling within a key, the feeling in a different key, but the same note, like we just talked about, like we just demonstrated, the feeling of the same degree in different harmonic contexts. So for instance, like when we have this note feels different in a different harmonic context. That's like very obvious, but like if you're just trying to learn scale degrees and like be like, okay, I know this scale degree now, but if it's like being played in a lot of different harmonic contexts, you could easily lose it. Or even like within a phrase, it's hard to pinpoint sometimes because it's in a phrase, it's in like a string of other notes. So it's like the context matters a lot, just like how it does in language. So harmonic context is something I didn't really talk about too much in the previous series I made, but it's very, very important. And actually, it's probably like way more important than just knowing the scale degree by itself, because when you know the scale degree, you know it only in the tonic context, tonic chord context. That sounds like the one I know, but this one sounds slightly different. That one sounds slightly different. That one also sounds slightly different. You need to know this degree in every different context possible, basically. So like differences, like practicing noting differences is essentially just all of what pattern recognition is. And I wanted to just note that because like that informs us on how we should practice. We shouldn't practice like just trying to drill in what that sound is in our heads in the same context over and over and over and over again, because that's not going to work in reality. In reality, when you hear music, there's so much, I mean, assuming you're listening to like interesting music, there's so much to it other than just that one degree that you're trying to like figure out. So you have to learn it within the context to actually make it a real skill. So very, very important, and also why the functional ear training stuff, when I initially was able to do it and I felt like, oh, I have all of it. But then when I started trying to play by ear for real, like listen to real songs, it was so hard. I was like, wait, don't I know every degree? But I didn't. I didn't know every degree in different contexts. I only knew it in the tonic context, the one chord context. So I learned that the hard way. I know this is so scrambled, but I just want to read it all out. Let's just keep going. So one thought that I actually had, because there was one time I was practicing Nocturne in E flat major, playing it, like listening to it and everything. And at a certain point, Nocturne in E major, E flat major modulates into B flat just for a little bit, but the right hand still actually exists within E flat major. It still sounds like it's an E flat major, but I'm hearing two different keys at the same time, which I found really, really interesting. So I heard basically E flat and B flat major at the same time. Like B flat major was happening in the left hand while E flat major was happening on the right hand. And I never had that experience before. But, and I know there's something there, but I think what I took away from it basically was that when we hear things in the framework of a key, it's just based on some sound cues and that's it. So for instance, when we hear specific sounds like this note right here, the 7th degree, is very, very telling to us. The pattern breaks basically are very, very telling to us. So 7 and 4, very, very important. Tritone right there. So the tritone almost informs us what the key is. Like hearing the tritone subconsciously informs us what the key is. Like you can hear the tritone of anything, I think, and then you will know what the key is based on that. Where does that lead you to? Ba, ba. It leads me to E flat, which is interesting actually because I thought it would lead me to C. Let's see. Huh. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this. There's multiple places it can lead you to. That makes sense. Because usually whenever the tritone is played, it's in a diminished chord, and diminished chords are sort of like what they call portals to different keys. So it makes sense that it's not just one key, but like I really expected that to happen instead of I wonder if it was just because I was influenced by E flat major from the Nocturne. When I was talking about it, I was hearing it in my head. So it probably drew me to it. Anyways, this is embarrassing. Oh well, let's just keep going. I feel like part of what I said is true. If you know the tritone, it generally pushes you towards certain keys. And the tritone of this, for instance, leads you to C major or E flat major. It probably can lead you to other things as well, but those are the two that I sort of hear. Let's try it with other things. Actually, I want to like verify this. I'm just gonna sing what I hear afterwards. So it led me to F major. Which is what I would expect it to, actually. Because this is the 4 of F major, this is the 7 of F major. So let's try it again for a different. I hate that I can't just play a tritone. Nope. Okay, that's what happened for this one. So led us to G major. This is the 4, and this is the 7. Okay, so that is what is expected. I have no idea why the first one. I just like went to E flat major. That was so interesting. Like that doesn't even fully make sense. Yeah, what? Okay, whatever. I'm gonna keep going. This is Musings of a Madman. Anyways, I'm gonna I'm gonna figure out a lot of things along the way, and I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes, and I'm gonna embarrass myself, and there's just gonna be a lot of things I get wrong. But this is part of the process, and I find it fun. Let's see. So one of my questions was, how would a baby play by ear? So listening first, start hearing a lot of different notes that are different, gain a lot of pattern recognition from that, listen and pay attention to the same notes, same note pattern of the notes. Things start to become clearer and clearer, and the differences become clearer and clearer. That's my assumption. Like babies that eventually develop perfect pitch or something like similar to that, I think your brain just like picks up patterns on its own. Sort of like how if you were to be thrown into a different country and you never can translate anything to English, like you would eventually just pick up what certain meanings are. So I was just thinking about like, how would a baby do that? You know, how would a baby figure out like what the connections are to a piano and like music, right? They probably just really, really try hard to figure out like the patterns, their brain, you know? I don't know if that says too much, but there's something in that that I feel is important. And it was more or less broken down even more with like the differences. So, and then we asked, is teaching an adult to perfect pitch possible? We talked about that. And how does the intuitive guessing technique work? Okay, so this one could use a demonstration. So let's just go to any music, actually. I feel like my iPad's on the fritz or something because so many of these things are like changing on its own. Why? This used to be just stuck on dark and now it's just changing randomly. Okay, I just typed in music. I don't want to hear this ad. Stop it. I guessed it right. I'm not perfect. I mean, that's definitely the pitches, but in terms of rhythm and all that stuff, I'm not playing it perfectly, but this is where my playing by ear is at right now. And sometimes I had to like, sometimes my brain was thinking of solfege. I still hate that, but like, it's like, I was actually hearing this as fa, or like, my brain was labeling it as fa. I told it to stop, but that actually triggered like this response in my brain, like, oh, is it this note? But obviously it's this note, just like through interval, like knowing that it's like closer in intervals. Anyways, why did I do that? Let me see. Oh, how does the intuitive guessing technique work? Shit, I'm not using the intuitive guessing technique. Hold on. Let's just move on to a different part of this song. I'm using the intuitive guessing technique. I'm gonna guess what it is instead of actually hearing the degree of the scales. That was terrible, but usually for intuitive guessing, like for my rate of hitting the correct note, it's like maybe 60%, which is not great, but it's better than it's better than getting it wrong most of the time. But I felt like I got it wrong most of the time here. So intuitive guessing is literally just a technique where like you just practice a lot of listening, and once you find a correct note, you basically it's the interval method. It's the interval method, but you're not actually paying attention to what exactly the interval is. You're just guessing. But at a certain point, your guessing will become more and more accurate. So it's almost as if you're training a skill where you can play by ear purely by feel of how things are moving. And even if you can't describe it yourself of like what the interval is, like, oh, that's a perfect fourth, or that's like a minor third down or whatever, you still know it internally. You still have a sense for it internally. And I think that's actually pretty similar to some language actually. Because like for language, somehow like your brain eventually just is able to pattern recognize things and assign meaning to things by just listening to it a lot. And when you think about what music is essentially just intervals. So I think your brain simply somehow like knows what those distances are being played. like the more you work on it, it's almost like you're just trying to talk, but like you're talking very poorly, and sometimes you get things wrong. You can't like quite make out the right words or say the right words correctly. But like the more you do it, the more you're able to like form that structure in your head, and it's less of guessing now, and you have this skill of being able to tell how things move just on intuition. So it becomes intuitive playing rather than intuitive guessing. And you might sometimes get it wrong, but like it's still a technique, and it's still something that works, I think. And if you were to ask someone to like explain every single thing that every single letter or word that they're trying to say, like whenever they speak sentences, I know maybe I'm taking this language analogy too far, but if you were to do that, like it'd be hard to like focus on every single word, you know what I mean? Like I feel like you need to have a point where you're like, yeah, this only makes sense in the context together. So this is what I've never practiced before for playing by ear. So to me, what I need to do more now is think of words and sentences rather than letters. So instead of just focusing on degrees by itself, I want to focus on learning the patterns where they put together and they make a certain pattern that's very common. Like for instance, or, and then the one that we all know, that's like a sentence right there, right? Or even a word if you want to call it a word instead. But whatever you call it, that's like a collection of notes rather than a single note. And we know it to be the major scale. And I think it's actually easier to tell what a major scale is than any individual note. And I feel like there's something about that progression where you work on the things where you can actually recognize things and they're very solid to you. Sort of like how, again, the baby analogy, when you're a baby and you're learning language, you don't learn the word mom or dad and think MOM or DAD. You just know the word, you know, you just, you know the word itself rather than the individual parts of the word. And I find that fascinating because it's like when we're playing by ear, we always try to focus on just hearing a single degree, but I don't think that's going to really help as much when it comes to like playing by ear for real songs, because everything will always be according to context. Everything will always have a collection of notes rather than a single note. So, of course, I don't think it's there's obviously flaws with this analogy with language and music because there are differences, but and you know, you can teach someone, like let's say someone who already knows a language, you can indeed teach them the alphabet of the other language first, right? I think that's the biggest flaw with this baby analogy, is that we're not babies anymore, and we're adults, and we have all this information in our heads. And plenty of people have learned languages where they learn the written form alongside of the visual form. It's and they're now fluent at it. But there could be an argument to be said that someone who learned the language from zero, from scratch, will always understand the language and the nuances better than someone who learned it through another language. I think that's true, but if you're fluent at that language, then you know how deep do you want your understanding to be, I guess. Like, is it that different, I guess, when it comes to music? I don't know. I'd have to figure that out. I have to think about that more. But regardless, the what I'm trying to get at here is learning words and sentences, basically collections of notes and note patterns, is probably better than just individual degrees. And it's probably easier too, because that's what learning songs are essentially. Songs are collections of notes, and if we're singing back a song or singing back the melody of a song or a phrase in one song, then we're basically singing back a pattern, a sentence. And if we can repeat that over and over again, and we can translate that to the piano and be able to play that really well and feel a strong connection with it and play it across different keys, transpose it, all that stuff, then we're strengthening this, our recognition ability to a new level, a level that we've never tried before. So that's what we're going to add into our practice, actually. And then, I feel like we should probably just talk about our practice. So our practice has 5 steps to it. Number 1 is intuitive guessing and interval training. So I know we dismissed interval training in our series videos, but considering how integral intervals are to music itself, I feel like they're pretty important. I think it's actually because this one guy from a course that I bought a while back kept saying interval training is bad, that somehow it got drilled into my head, and then I just decided not to practice intervals. Bad on him. I mean, like, there's nuance to it, obviously, but I think it's very misleading to tell people that you shouldn't practice intervals at all. So the reason why he said it is because, very simply, if you use intervals to determine like whether or not, if you use reference songs to determine your intervals, you might accidentally fall into the key of that reference song. So for instance, the Bridal March. So that implies that we're in C major. But what if we're actually in F major? And you hear that, and the way you tell that interval is bum, 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 bum. All of a sudden you're in C major now. But all you tried to do is figure out the interval between G and C within F major, but you fell into C major as your key. That's not good. And I totally agree with him that that's not good. And that's why it's probably better to learn intervals with no reference notes, by just like recognizing patterns and not using a reference song, which is learning by analogy again. I think the key takeaway to a lot of what I'm saying is don't learn by analogy, and like just internalize the feelings of things when it comes to playing by ear. And also for interval stuff, it's also, you can almost think of interval stuff as like similar to degrees in a way. They're like the building blocks, right? So an interval by itself is very hard to understand, I think. But an interval within like a word or a sentence is easier to understand. So this collection of intervals right here, or even that, we know it as the why am I blanking on this? The triad, right? The C major chord. And when we talk about that in terms of intervals, we say major third, minor third, perfect fourth. And then if we talk about the individual notes, we say C, E, G, and C, or 1, 3, 5, 1. But if we look at it fundamentally, what it actually is, it's all of those things at once. It's the absolute pitches of C, E, or C4, E4, G4, and C5. That's the absolute pitch of it. And then relative pitch, it's 1, 3, 5, 1. And then the intervals, we're hearing the major interval, we're hearing the minor interval, and we're hearing that perfect fourth as well. So we're really, it's all of those things at once, and the ability to basically recognize it as all of those things at once is probably where we need to get to, and is why I think interval training is probably actually necessary. Like, it makes sense. Like, I don't want to listen to some. I think listening to that guy basically caused me to not do interval training, and I feel like interval training is actually necessary. So it's kind of ironic buying a course to like play by ear and learn how to play by ear, and then like literally the course leads you the wrong way. I mean, yeah, that's again, and what he's saying is not wrong, but it is misleading, and it misled me still. So I actually think that I will integrate interval training with intuitive guessing and with pattern memory plus practicing words and sentences with environments. So it's kind of a lot of things at once. Like, I feel like this is really, really difficult for a beginner to construct themselves. I am basically a beginner, but I'm not like complete beginner. Obviously, I can recognize scale degrees now, and I understand them within different harmonic contexts as well, and I have like a strong idea of how all this fits together. But it's so maybe in that sense, I'm not like a complete beginner, but my skill level with it is basically a beginner, in my opinion. And to me, a beginner could never figure this out. Like, someone who hasn't tried this could never figure out that this is probably how you should like practice, because I think a complete beginner would use intuitive guessing for sure. Intuitive guessing is probably how everyone tries to play by ear initially. They listen to a song, and then they just go to the piano and try to guess until they feel it, and then they're like, oh, the note went up, so they try to guess a certain amount, and then you could improve and get better at that. So intuitive guessing is like the natural state of things, right? But pattern memory and recognizing things by words and sentences or phrases in this, like trying to do it as a collection, that in itself also is sort of intuitive. That's sort of like what the next step is in terms of like, oh, what is the chord that's playing alongside this melody? Like, what is it? Like, trying to figure it out. And I think eventually you'd get there. You'd be like, oh, like I can actually hear that these melodies sound a certain way when this chord is being played. Like, you sort of just start figuring it out. So in a sense, like, a beginner will eventually figure this out. Intuitive guessing and pattern memory plus playing things as a collection and in the environment. So the collection is like words and sentences. So if you're playing it as a collection with words and sentences, then like I think that's really good, because but it's so interesting how like some things you'll naturally do, but then if someone else tells you with like a course structure or something like that to not do it, you won't do it and you won't practice it. But those are like the natural things I feel like you have to actually practice to get better, which is kind of funny. So degree distinction practice and instantaneous recognition is basically the entirety of my 100-day challenge. Like, it's what I try to do most of the time. It's what I try to practice most of the time. And I think like I got better at it because of that. But when you're doing it without the pattern memory and the word and sentence recognition, you're missing a lot of the aspects, and it's like you can't fit all the puzzle pieces together. So intuitive guessing and interval training, recognizing and feeling out the intervals, actually knowing them, actually, like not just guessing them, but knowing them will inform you, and eventually you'll be able to like actually use intervals to play and stuff like that. And then pattern memory. Also, I did say one thing about Frank Tedesco that might be slightly inaccurate. He actually does do that. He doesn't do it entirely all the time, but he does do it sometimes. So in a pianote video on YouTube, the channel is called Pianote, he mentioned that he does listen to intervals between notes to play them sometimes, but in a stream that he did a while back, he said that his main method is to listen and feel the tonic and then compare different notes to the tonic instead of every single interval. But he basically does both. He does both sometimes. So so I definitely feel like what I said back then was wrong when it came to intervals. I think a part of me was influenced by the guy that said don't ever train intervals or whatever in the beginning. So, which is wrong. Like, training intervals is good. So I'm going to add that back into the practice. And then I'm also going to add back, I'm going to add back or add a new version of the practice where I focus on phrases and like memorizing, understanding those phrases as a collection and really, really seeing it as like a whole instead of pieces, because I've always been just looking at things in pieces, and I think that's the wrong approach. So that's the second part of my practice, and then the third part is what I've been already doing, but I'm going to take what I've been already doing to the next level. So degree distinction practice plus instantaneous recognition plus my visualizer. So this is the part where I actually practice my visualizer. And so the degree distinction, like I can hear that as the tonic immediately, but when I play that, for instance, I mean, right now I could hear it as like the fourth degree instantaneously. But in a song, right, when I'm listening to a song, it's hard for me to recognize it instantaneously. So the goal is to have instantaneous recognition for each degree, which will never happen unless I have a good grip of different harmonial contexts and different, like, unless I can see the bigger picture is what I'm trying to say. So in a real song, it'll never just be a single degree. There's going to be so many other collections of sounds at the same time. So by trying to break down the piece and the collection, by understanding the collection, I will better understand like how to instantaneously recognize a certain degree within that context. So it kind of has to be like a repeated practice with different songs over and over and over again. Unless I just want to recognize a very specific collection like constantly, which is what I did basically for the tonic context. Now I can recognize that as A, and like I could have played any random note and I could know what it is basically, like instantaneously. So basically we need to change the environment as much as possible, and we can do this in very specific ways, right? So now that we know things in the tonic context, we just need to play this. Probably the next context is the minor, right? So it's sort of like I'm gonna learn the same degrees, I guess. I don't even know if I want to call them degrees at that point, because the degrees from change. This is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm gonna learn the same pitches and understand them and feel them in the different context, and then be able to recognize it instantly. And I think the next step for me is to do that in this minor context, so then I stop getting confused. And then after I do the minor context, I'm going to do it in, let's say, the 4-chord context. Like, and then what I should be able to do is instantly recognize those notes in the 4-chord context, and then 5-chord context, and then 3-chord context, and then 2-chord context. And I think, this is my theory, if I were to do that, I would get actually pretty good at chord recognition as well, because I'm basically internalizing how that context or harmonic context sounds. So I will internalize the harmony or how the chord feels like as well. So this is just an assumption. I don't know if that's going to happen, but this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do for that practice. So that's like me trying my best to apply the degree distinction practice with different environments. And I'll try to also look at my visualizer for this, but since I do want to try my best to internalize my own visualizer, the color visualizer I created, because I think it really will help with serving as a zero key placeholder, a visual placeholder for before I go to the piano. Because I was trying to listen to things like playing by ear, or listen to things by ear this morning with no piano, and it just feels really, really hard to store that information like as pure audio only, especially while listening to the song. So storing it with a visual, it really, really makes things easier in my opinion. So I will try to internalize that, my color visualizer. And then 4 is piano association. So the visualizer is pointless if I don't bring it to the piano. So piano association is associating the visualizer alongside of the pitch itself with the piano and staring really, really deeply into the piano. Like just staring really, really deeply into the piano. Like, and seeing the color as well, and seeing like really creating that connection with the pitch, basically, with the relative pitch of the degree of that scale. So that's number 4, because ultimately we need to get really good at that. And I think that's basically, it's another way of saying I'm going to be practicing my keys. I'm going to be practicing like really getting to know each key like super well, like not just be able to play the scales of each key easily, which I can do already, but to know that when I play a note, this is the 4 of C, this is the 1 of F, this is the 2 of E flat, and so on, right? I mean, maybe not like that, but like if I was in a key already, like let's say G, then I know that this is the 7, right? So I have to be able to recognize that instantaneously and know it instantaneously. And then we have perfect pitch practice, which is not necessarily a part of this. I feel like we can not have perfect pitch and then we'd still have a really good practice. But perfect pitch is just something I'm curious about, if just to see if I can achieve it. But these 4, I feel like are the building blocks of playing by ear. Like all of them together, not separate, but together will form my ability to play by ear. Like all of them are important. And to practice one without the other is like, I don't have an analogy. Practicing one with the other is just not gonna work, basically. Like you can get so good at distinguishing degrees or playing that functional ear training game, which is what I got good at. Like I could play it immediately, but it doesn't matter because like when you listen to a song, it's in a different context. So you have to be good at instantaneous recognition in different harmonic contexts. And then for pattern memory and recognition, if you can't remember what you hear and you can't like see the phrases, like remember the phrases, or you don't have like a placeholder, you can't play it by ear because you can't retain it. So that needs to be practiced. And then for interval stuff, I think that the interval stuff is basically the building blocks of music. So if you lack the understanding of intervals, you simply will be missing an element of the listening experience, basically. Like maybe you'll know it intuitively. Like you'll hear it, and then you can hear it and then sort of feel it out, like, oh, it went down or up, but like you're missing a part of the full picture if you don't have the full knowledge of whether or not like that was a movement, a specific movement, down or up by a specific amount. So I do actually think that interval training, like logically, it just makes way too much sense. It's like baked into music. It's what music is. Music is essentially just distances between pitches. So it feels like you have to practice that. Like there's no arguing against it. And for the longest time, I didn't want to practice it because someone told me not to practice it. And I really hate that. I paid money to a guy who basically led me astray, who misled me, which is hilarious in so many ways. But yeah, like these are the building blocks. In my opinion, right now I'm on super Madman mode, and I don't know if any of this is true necessarily. Like all of it sounds true in theory, but this is what I've thought up. This is what I've reasoned based on my brain constantly thinking about it for the past 3 days. And hopefully now I feel like, you know, along the journey, I'm so sure that I'm going to come up with more like crazy ideas. I mean, this isn't crazy, but more like talking about ideas and not enough practicing. So this series will continue, but it'll probably continue with way more practice involved rather than me just talking about things. But I feel like I'm not actually going to post this on my second channel. I think I'm just going to post this unlisted on my playing by ear challenge. But instead of calling it to 100, which is to 100 practice days, I'm actually going to call it Musings of a Madman trying to play piano by ear. I know it's such a long title, but it sounds funny and I like it. And I do feel like a madman when I'm talking about these things. I honestly have no idea who's actually going to watch this, but I feel like I'm having fun talking about this. And it's just so fun. I love, like, I really like just thinking about this too. Like, it's not just trying to get it, but like thinking about it, like actually breaking things down. And like, I feel like I kind of just like breaking things down in general, like not just for music, but for everything. Like to see everything broken down into its fundamental parts. Yeah, what's going to be interesting is the different contexts. Once we add in accidentals, they're going to be quite interesting. Anyways, yeah, I guess this was today's practice session. It was just me talking. But I'm gonna try to construct some good exercises for our practice. And I'm gonna actually allocate more time to this. I think we need at least an hour for playing by ear. It's gonna take away from other things, but now that I feel like I'm I've regained my fire for practicing this. I think this is the time to give more time to it. Like all of these steps seem like they all fit together very, very, very well. And I think that we have something good going. Yeah, we can actually revisit pieces we've played back then and start seeing it in the bigger picture of things rather than just scale degrees, actually. Because I think back then, all I did was look at it in terms of scale degrees. I didn't think about the harmonic context. I didn't think about like the collection of notes together that form the melody and how they are like their movement, the movement of it, the distances between them. All I thought about was the degree, and that's it. Like I got so caught up in just focusing on the degree. And I think that's actually what's the weakest part about my visualizer, is that the visualizer can only tell you what the degree is. And I feel like there needs to be a way to see or understand it in a harmonic context. My instant thought right now is that the background of the visualizer can adapt to different colors. So for instance, if we have like red square, yellow triangle, and blue square, the background right now would be like a red background. And then the background right now would be a purple background. So it's sort of like it informs you what the harmonic context is. Like there's something in the environment. There should be a visual element in the environment that indicates the context of things. And there should also be something else that somehow visualizes the words, the phrases. Like, I mean, in staff, the way they construct it is with rhythm, right? So it's almost as if you kind of have to do that as well. Like, the staff does it really well. Yeah, basically the staff contains all the information. Like it contains the harmonical context in the left hand usually, and then you can see the phrase and melody and whatnot on the treble clef. The only issue is that you have to look at it you have to be able to read the staff in the key that you're in. Otherwise, they just seem like notes. They just seem like C, F, B, whatever that you're reading on the staff. So it's like almost like a new ability to see the staff as the music itself, with the harmonic context and the phrasing and everything. Like you're looking at all of it at once. And I think my visualizer is missing that. So I think we need to change our visualizer somehow. I almost feel like just slapping on the visualizer onto the staff, the grand staff, like slapping it on and having the rows be colors instead, it'll still retain the same shape, and you can essentially use the same like rhythmic indications So it'll be like a square that's the color, but the row would be the color, probably. And then the indication of the rhythm can be the same as the staff. But the thing won't be just a circle, but it'll actually be the shape. And then you would have maybe like the bottom part indicate the environment, I guess. Yeah, but how do you indicate a fourth though? Like because I'm imagining that the red square indicates this, but how about this? Like, how do you do a suspended chord? I guess you could just write 4. But then that usually means an inversion, doesn't it? Anyways, there's definitely a lot. I'm not trying to invent a whole new system at the moment. I just want it to be like visually easier and visually adaptive according to relative pitch. Because the grand staff, like I said, is for absolute pitch. And if we can create a version where it's like it carries the same information of the grand staff for relative pitch, that would be the ideal visualizer, in my opinion. But I guess technically the left hand or the harmonic context can also just be the same as the staff above. So, or basically like the bass clef, but with the shapes and colors as well. So that way you don't have to really. But I feel like the suspended stuff still works in the same way because like figured bass, you just literally borrow everything from figured bass, and then it works. Yeah, you could technically do this with numbers as well, but the numbers are hard to visualize. Yeah, I think that's basically it. So basically, my visualizer is just the grand staff, but with shapes and colors. That's it. That's that is essentially it. There's no difference other than that, and that it indicates things for relative pitch instead of perfect pitch, instead of absolute pitch. Those are the key 3 differences. And then for figured bass, it would just be the shape instead of the numbers as well. The shape and color instead of the numbers as well. I think we finally have it. We finally have the full picture in our heads. Finally. You know, we keep saying that, and then we add more to it. So I think the more we discover and more we figure out, the more things will change. But I finally feel like I have a good practice session encompassing every piece of what we want. Okay, that's good enough.